I'd love to discuss something I'm passionate about: equality in education. As educators, I would imagine we all believe in equity. I doubt there are any differences of opinion on that topic. What I'd like to do is add a dimension to what we mean by equality in education. I'd like to add the brain to the equity in education equation. Let me explain. We all have a brain. Our brain is our most important asset. We use our brain for everything we do, for every movement, for every thought, for every experience, for every emotion. Our brain will be with us throughout our lifetime. It is what is necessary to learn throughout life. We can leverage that asset to equalize the distribution of opportunities in our lives. We could take the view that the brain is the equalizer in equity in education conversation. Because the brain drives all of who we are, our behavior, our performance, our emotions, our relationships, to level the playing field, it has to start with the brain. The OECD report, No More Failures, calls for changes to the design, practice, and resourcing of education. This can be achieved if we focus on the individual and their brain. Let's put our focus on strengthening the brain to learn and to function. What I propose is a paradigm shift, a different focus in education, adding the brain to the education equation, adding the brain to the equity in education equation. It is possible, with the power of neuroplasticity, to change and strengthen the brain of all learners. Students who learn easily, students who struggle, students from diverse backgrounds, students who have experienced trauma, students of colour, students in different socioeconomic situations, students of different genders, students of different ethnic origins. By strengthening the brain of all learners, they will have the capability to use their new capacities to change their lives. Neuroplasticity, simply put, is the ability of the brain to change. By harnessing the power of neuroplasticity, we can target specific cognitive functions of the brain and supercharge them. Cognitive functions of the brain are the regions or networks of regions that perform a specific job or role. By targeting and strengthening these cognitive functions, the brain increases its capacity to learn. Dr. Norman Doidge, the author of The Brain That Changes Itself, states that training the brain processes that make possible reasoning and rationality is arguably one of the most important positive developments one could imagine for our world, with its complex problems. We now have the science to know we can enhance the brain. Research has proven that strengthening specific cognitive functions results in improvements in reading and mathematics. But not just these academic areas. Strengthening the functioning of the brain leads to positive changes in neural networks used for reasoning, thinking, planning, problem solving, executive control, working memory, attention, introspection and self-awareness, perspective taking, insight, goal setting and execution, mental initiative. Strengthening the functioning of the brain leads to positive changes in cognitive functioning, processing speed, fluid and deductive reasoning, cognitive flexibility and efficiency, oral vocabulary, sustained and selective attention, long-term storage and retrieval. Strengthening the functioning of the brain leads to positive changes in academic achievement, reading, reading comprehension, reading speed, vocabulary, writing speed, written language, academic fluency, broad academic achievement, math computation, math calculation speed, math concepts and problem solving. Strengthening the functioning of the brain leads to positive changes in well-being and social emotional intelligence. a reduction in depression and anxiety, increased engagement, being calmer, more optimistic, more fearless, more able to interpret and express emotions, more willing to engage in social situations, better able to understand interpersonal relationships, more able to reflect on behavior and problem solve in social situations. Given this science, it is hard to disregard the fact that the brain can be the equalizer in education. By focusing on strengthening each individual brain to learn, students' lives will be enhanced. The OECD report, No More Failures, calls for fairness and inclusion in education. It proposes to do this through changing the design, practices, and resourcing in education. It is possible if we focus on the individual, their brain, and cognitive programming for all students. This means all students will be strengthening their brains. I propose that we design a curriculum that includes cognitive programming, where students can change their brain and strengthen its functioning at the same time as they are learning content and participating in other curriculum. A design where each student works daily for 30 minutes on cognitive programming, targeting specific functions in the brain that they will need for life. We can change practices in education where the brain is the center of the education equation for all students. We can look at the resourcing of education to focus on the brains of all students. There are multiple schools in Spain, Canada, the US, and New Zealand that provide 30 minutes per day of cognitive programming for their students. This programming is targeting specific cognitive functions 1 year at a time. So as each student moves through their grades, they are strengthening a different function so that the outcomes I mentioned earlier will be part of their reality. There are research studies underway with students from trauma backgrounds, with addiction in the juvenile justice system, with learning disabilities, with acquired brain injuries. And the results are very positive. The brain can change and strengthen, allowing for the possibilities of change for our young people. Strengthening the functioning of the brain will help students to discern what information is true, be resilient and flexible, be creative, be empathetic, be collaborative. Equity is where every student can strengthen their brain. This is inclusion at its most fundamental level, where all students will strengthen their brains so they can not only reach the basic minimum level of skills, but reach beyond. This is fairness, where personal or socioeconomic circumstances are not obstacles to education success, because each individual brain will be strengthened. Come and join me in putting the brain in the equity in education equation.